And now I'm happy to answer or dodge any question you like. Yeah. Okay. Look, I think it is a very good point and a very troubling point. By the way, you want to talk about the media. You know, I've got reporters who are interviewing people who went to grade school with me. I'm one of 17 candidates running for president. Obama's been in the White House 6.5 years. We still haven't seen his college transcript. It's why people are fed up. Listen, I think there needs to be transparency and sunshine and light. And I think there is a power to truth. Yes, sir. You know, if you look at what's happening to our economy, we have seen for 6.5 years Washington hammering the living daylights out of jobs, and in particular hammering the living daylights out of small businesses. My number one priority in office and my number one priority as president will be economic growth and jobs and opportunity. So where the trade deficits are coming from, listen, a lot of people blame the trade deficits on trade agreements, but I'll tell you what's killing us. What's killing us is that American business is finding it harder and harder to be competitive with crushing taxes and crushing regulations that are making it impossible to compete. You want to turn things around? As I said a minute ago, adopt a simple flat tax where we lower the tax rates. We spend $500 billion a year in tax compliance. You want to turn things around, repeal Obamacare. One of the things I do all the time, especially in Texas, we do small business roundtables, where I sit down and I ask small business owners, tell me what challenges you're facing. I have never done a small business roundtable when at least half of the people there didn't point to Obamacare as the single biggest challenge facing their jobs. And 2/3 of all new jobs come from small businesses. You want to turn it around, you've got to facilitate that. And let me mention something else, which is energy. I've introduced legislation in the Senate called the American Energy Renaissance Act. It is the most comprehensive, it is the broadest energy legislation to remove all of the federal barriers to developing our vast energy resources here. Now, what that would enable us to do is exactly what your question is. Bring manufacturing jobs back to America. Bring heavy manufacturing. Bring the steel industry back to America. But it lets us compete with China. Not based on low-cost labor. Lord knows we don't want to compete with them based on low-cost labor. It lets us compete with them based on abundant, low-cost energy that God has blessed this country with. We can turn our trade deficit around entirely. But the answer, I believe, is not cutting off trade with the rest of the world. I think that hurts America. Like Reagan, I believe when we open up foreign markets, it benefits America. But we've got to have an environment where we're not causing our businesses, our manufacturers, to fight with both arms tied behind their back. We got to unchain them. You know, the Obama administration is worried about corporate inversions. All these companies that are fleeing America and incorporating abroad. You know what? 2 years into my administration, I want a bunch of foreign companies worried about corporate inversions when companies from all over the world want to come to America because it's the best environment on the face of the planet to run a business. Yeah. Well, sure. So we're going to have, likely next month, a vote on this Iran deal. Now, unfortunately, maddeningly, Congress has largely given away much of its constitutional authority to the president. It makes no sense. It's something I fought very hard against. In order to defeat this, we have to pass a resolution of disapproval, which the president can veto, which means to stop this deal from going into effect, we need 2/3 of the House and 2/3 of the Senate. All Obama needs to force this deal through is 34 Democratic senators. The current public count is 30 Democratic senators have come out in favor of it. Now, it is my hope over the next month to continue doing everything I can to energize and mobilize the American people to rise up and call their elected representatives and say, stop this catastrophic deal. In another 2 weeks, on September 9th, we're hosting a huge rally on Capitol Hill. I invited Donald Trump to come join me. He's going to join me at that, standing against this deal. Now, Barrasso has some good ideas. I think we should use every tool available to try to stop this catastrophic deal. The reality, though, is there are right now far too many Democrats who value partisan allegiance to the Obama White House more than they value the national security of this country, standing with Israel and protecting the safety and security of millions of Americans. If it ends up that Democrats make that choice, and it's my hope they don't, it's my hope that Democrats, this is the most important vote any member of Congress is likely to cast in his or her career. It's my hope they do the right thing, that they get back to the tradition of Scoop Jackson Democrats, of JFK Democrats, of Joe Lieberman Democrats. There was a time when Democrats actually believed in protecting this country. It's my hope we see more of them get back to that. But I'll say this, if we don't, if Democrats decide they're Democrats first rather than representing their constituents, then that will make this issue, stopping a nuclear Iran, perhaps the most important issue in the 2016 presidential election. And well, what I would say is I think it would be very, very beneficial for Jeanne Shaheen to hear from every man and woman in New Hampshire. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Look, it's a great question. I think these rules are catastrophic, and I think they're lawless. And let me say two things on this. One is substantive and one is political. Substantively, one of the things that is maddening to us as conservatives, when you look at the regulatory state, you look at the pile of regulations from Washington, when Democrats are in power, regulations grow exponentially. When Republicans are in power, regulations still grow, they just grow a little more slowly. I had a friend of mine suggest a bumper sticker. Republicans, we waste less. Not exactly a banner to march into battle under. If you look at President Obama and what he has done with executive power, what he's done that's wrong, that is abusive, is he has intruded into the Article I legislative authority of Congress. Under the Constitution, Congress makes the law, and no president has the authority to make the law, to change the law, or ignore the law. That being said, however, the president has considerable authority under Article II, the executive branch. And if you look at the entire regulatory state, the fourth branch of government that's grown up, that is, over the decade, Congress's efforts to constrain the president's constitutional authority to execute the laws. We have never once seen a president willing to use the full Article II executive authority of the president to go directly after the regulatory state. And I make a promise to each and every one of you, if I am elected, when I leave the White House, it will not be the case that regulations have grown more slowly. It will be the case that regulations are materially smaller and human liberty is an equal amount larger. Yeah, it's good to see you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yep. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Right. Right. Yep. Right. Yes. That is a fabulously important question. We need to speak the truth. You know, there is a dynamic nationally. Conservatives win when we effectively articulate what it is we believe. Liberals win when they effectively hide and obfuscate what they believe. And the reason is twofold. One, our ideas work and theirs don't. And two, America is and remains a center-right country. So let's take people who are struggling. I'll tell you why I'm a conservative. I've described my political philosophy as opportunity conservatism, which is that every policy we think about, we talk about, should focus like a laser on opportunity, on easing the means of ascent up the economic ladder. I think the single biggest lie in all of politics is the lie that Republicans are the party of the rich. Truth of the matter is the rich do just fine with big government. Big business does great with big government. Gets in bed with lobbyists and accountants. Do you know the top 1% in this country, the millionaires and billionaires the president constantly demagogues, today earn a higher share of our income than any year since 1928. So how do we make this case? Listen, I cannot wait to stand on a debate stage next to Hillary Clinton. And you know, she will prattle on about income inequality. I love it when Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama talk about income inequality because it's increased dramatically under their policies. If you look at the African American community, talk about a community that has been decimated by policies that do not work. We saw the rioting in Baltimore. The breakdown of schools, the breakdown of law and order, the breakdown of the family, which big government policies have broken up families. And what did Barack Obama do? He blamed what was happening on Republicans. Now, as a bit of history, the last Republican mayor of Baltimore was elected in 1963. I wasn't even a twinkle in my daddy's eye in 1963. And yet, Democrats have had every seat on the city council, every mayor, for over 50 years. And they have destroyed that city. And yet they play victim politics trying to blame someone else. This campaign is about, I'll tell you, I think about every policy from the perspective of my dad. When he was a teenage immigrant washing dishes, how would it have impacted him? If my dad were washing dishes today, the odds are incredibly high he would have lost his job. Because of trillions in new taxes and crushing regulations, the people who are laid off are not the CEOs. It's the teenage immigrants washing dishes on that first rung of the economic ladder. If my dad hadn't been laid off, the odds are overwhelming he would have had his hours forcibly reduced to 28, 29 hours a week because Obamacare kicks in at 30 hours a week. You can't feed your family on 28, 29 hours a week. And I think we need to go and make the case. The reason that I am a conservative is free market policies. The American free enterprise system is the greatest engine for prosperity and opportunity the world has ever seen. Let me make a final point on that. So many Republicans don't get that. Here's an experiment. The next time a Republican politician is on TV and the topic of race or class comes up, turn off the volume. Far too many, watch their body language, far too many Republicans believe we're wrong. Can we talk about capital gains taxes? I can talk about that. School choice. School choice is the civil rights issue of the 21st century. Every child in America has a right and deserves access to a quality education regardless of race, ethnicity, zip code, or wealth. And we've never had a Republican presidential nominee who got that, who understood that in their gut, who was willing to stand up. We had people who, God love them, they read a sentence or two on a talking point saying, I support school choice. But we haven't had anyone willing to go into the African American communities, go into the Hispanic communities and say, your children have every right to achieve the American dream just like every other child, and we are going to fulfill that promise for every kid in America. That's how we do it, is we speak the truth with a smile. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. Right. Right. Yeah. It's a great question. You're right. Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton's going to do the same thing. They're going to promise forgiving student loans, free tuition. You know, let me tell you the very simplest principle of economics. It's called Tomstoffel. There ain't no such thing as a free lunch. Here's what the Democrats do. Every election they go and promise to give away free stuff. And they think that the voters, that we're gullible, and if we're told you get free stuff, that we'll take it. Well, everything that they give away, they first have to take from the American people. So we've seen for 6.5 years massive taxes and regulations. We've seen a national debt going from $10 trillion to $18 trillion. You give away free college tuition, that goes up and up and up and up. And the only people who pay for it is us. Here's the problem. Listen, I understand this firsthand. I understand being a student who's struggling. When I was in high school, my parents went bankrupt. So when I went to school, my parents had no ability to help me make it through school. I found myself at 17 financially independent and involuntarily at that. I took $100,000 in school loans to pay my way through college and grad school. So when I came out, I had a mortgage, but I didn't have a house. I paid off my student loans 6 years ago. I get firsthand what it's like to be coming out of school with loans up to your eyeballs. The problem isn't the loans on their face, although a lot of the federal student loan industry is driving up the cost of education. Here's the problem is young people, when they're coming out of school, can't find a job. Or if they do find a job, it's working part-time serving coffee, and they're not building skills to start a career. It wasn't very long ago that young people coming out of school had 2, 3, 4, 5 job offers, had the opportunity to start a career. I think the most potent things on student loans is I want everyone coming out to get a job and have a brighter future, and all of that takes care of itself. And if the Democrats say we'll give you free tuition, you're paying the bill. That debt, you're stuck with it. The interest on that debt consumes more and more and more of the federal government. And by the way, when the rest of us are dead and buried, it's the folks that got the free tuition that suddenly have to pay for it all. If you look at countries across the world, if you look at socialist countries across the world, where they offer, right, they offer all sorts of free stuff, and you have economic growth that is stagnant. What happens, we know how socialism works. If you look at a socialist country, there are rich people in a socialist country. If you happen to have been born into the right family, you can have a manicured garden, you can drive a Rolls Royce, you can live like a king. You might be a king. What you don't see in socialist countries are new rich people. What you don't see is the economic mobility. Listen, there's a reason why your family and my family and all of our families came to America. Because this country has allowed people with nothing to achieve anything. That doesn't happen if government takes over so much of the economy, puts so much taxes and debt on us that growth goes away. So I think the future for young people is promising an opportunity to have a better and better job and to achieve your dreams. That's how young people are able to pay off their debts. Not more free stuff, but a job that lets them stand on their own feet and have a brighter future. Wonderful. Wow.
We were legal immigrants. We're waiting
Yep.
on us
Yep.
to get private sponsorship. There's all this talk about illegal immigration, but it seems like us legal immigrants are being slapped in the face.
Absolutely.
When are we going to? When is the country going to see that it is the legal immigrants that have built this nation, and generations have passed, and new legal immigrants are coming in.
Yep.
And the illegal immigrants are taking away from the possibility of people from China, from Sweden, from everywhere else to come here
Yep.
legally.
Yep.
As President of the United States, what are you going to do about the illegal immigration
Right.
problem?
Right. Well, let me say, you're having come from Romania, you know firsthand, as my family does, just how precious the freedom is that we have here. It is an incredible blessing to be the child of an immigrant who fled oppression. You know, when it comes to immigration, I think there's a lot of bipartisan common ground outside of Washington. I think there is overwhelming bipartisan agreement outside of Washington that we have got to get serious about securing the borders and stopping illegal immigration. And I think there is also considerable bipartisan agreement outside of Washington that we need to continue to welcome and celebrate legal immigrants.
Senator Cruz, we have time for one last question.
All right, let me briefly finish answering this, which is, if we focus where there's bipartisan agreement, that's how you pass immigration reform. And let me make a point that is a point of distinction. You know, Bill O'Brien talked about people who are campaign conservatives who talk a good game. Have you noticed that every election cycle, every candidate says they're the most gosh diddly conservative person to ever live? In Cleveland, every one of the candidates said they're conservative. Not a one of them stood up and said, I'm an establishment moderate squish. I stand for absolutely nothing. They don't say that. Have you noticed that they run as us? Meanwhile, they say if you're actually one of us, you can't get elected. If you're really a conservative, you're unelectable, but they all pretend to be conservative to try to get elected. On that debate stage, every person on that stage claims to be against amnesty. And yet a majority of the candidates on that stage have previously and publicly advocated amnesty. I'm the only candidate on that stage who has always and consistently opposed amnesty, and indeed, when Chuck Schumer and Harry Reid and a bunch of establishment Republicans tried to force through a massive amnesty bill, I'm the only one on that stage who led the fight, standing with Jeff Sessions, to defeat amnesty, and we defeated it in the United States Congress. All right, yes, sir. We'll do final one here. Yeah. Yeah. Sure. So the question of birthright citizenship, let me break it into two issues. One, the policy, and the second, the constitutional issue. On the policy, it doesn't make any sense for us to grant automatic citizenship to the children of those who came here illegally. It's a policy we should change because we shouldn't be incentivizing people to break the law. And by the way, that has been my position consistently since the day I began running for office. There are some candidates in this race who have discovered this issue more recently. There is a second question of how to change the policy. Now, among constitutional scholars, there is a good faith dispute. There are some constitutional scholars who argue that Congress could change the policy through a statute. What the 14th Amendment provides is that persons born in the United States, and the key phrase is, and subject to the jurisdiction thereof, are citizens by birth. And so, there are constitutional scholars that argue Congress could define what subject to the jurisdiction thereof means to exclude the children of those who are here illegally. There are other constitutional scholars who make a serious argument that you could only change that through a constitutional amendment. In my view, whichever side is right, we should pursue it. If it needs to be a statute, we should pass a statute. If it needs to be an amendment, we should pass an amendment. We should change the policy. But that being said, either way you change the policy is going to take an extended period of time. That is not a short-term endeavor. That is a long-term project. We have an illegal immigration crisis now. I represent Texas. We've got 1,200 miles of border with Mexico. We deal every day with the criminal effects, with the national security effects, with the effects driving down jobs and driving down wages. And so the top priority on immigration, I think, should be electing a president who will actually enforce the laws and secure the border right now. And we know how to do this. We know what works. Boots on the ground, tripling the Border Patrol, increasing fourfold the fixed wing and rotary wing aircraft, putting in place a strong biometric exit entry system, putting in place a strong E-Verify system. We know the policies that work. What is missing is the political will to get it done. And I commit to you, if I am president, we will get it done. We will enforce the laws and solve the problem. Let me just make a final comment because it's getting late and I want to let folks get home. But thank you for being here. The campaign that we are putting together is a campaign based on the grassroots. The strength of this campaign comes from the grassroots. We're seeing that old Reagan coalition coming together. We're seeing conservatives and evangelicals and libertarians. We're seeing young people and Hispanics and African Americans and women and Reagan Democrats. And so I'm here asking you to join us. Join us on the ground. We are all in on New Hampshire. And let me give you an indication of the power of the men and women here. Out of 17 Republican candidates, we all filed our fundraising. Do you know which campaign raised the most hard money? We did. In just over 3 months, our campaign raised together over $14.3 million. Jeb Bush is second with $11.4 million. The difference is his came from 12,000 donors. Our $14 million came from over 175,000 contributions. The average contribution is $68. That is the power of the grassroots. So I ask every one of you, join us, volunteer, be a leader in your county, be a leader in your precinct, reach out to your friends and neighbors, go online, support us financially. This is a campaign that is based on the grassroots. You are the strength of this campaign. And if we stand together, if we unify conservatives, we're going to win this primary. And we're going to win the general election and turn this country around. I'm honored and humbled to be with you. Thank you, and God bless you. God bless you.
Thank you, everybody. I'd like to thank you all for coming.
Croc TV.